After one season in Carolina, Jadeveon Clowney is done, and Jonathon Brooks, a second-year running back for the Panthers, also out for the upcoming season. How will this impact the Panthers in 2025? I'll tell you right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show right here on YouTube, where I am live as we have an emergency episode reacting to the Jadeveon Clowney and Jonathon Brooks news. You also can check me out wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, where on Fridays throughout the offseason, I answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions. I already record the mailbag, by the way, so do not send me questions in for this week. And I'm hopefully going to answer a lot of the questions that you would have right now, but send in questions either by adding me or DMing me on Twitter at Julian Council or adding me on Blue Sky at Julian Council for next week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. And today's emergency episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Big news coming out here over the last 30 minutes in Charlotte, as Jadeveon Clowney is no longer a Carolina Panther, and Jonathon Brooks will be out for the 2025 season. Two big pieces of news. One, not surprising, and the other also probably not that surprising when looking at it. And Jadeveon Clowney, will start there. He was a part of a series of post-draft cuts that happened on Thursday here in Charlotte, as Jordan Matthews, the wide receiver turned tight end, he's gone. Colin Granger, who we talked about on, today's show, this morning show, if you listen to it or watch it on YouTube, we talked about undrafted free agents, 5 guys that were intriguing. He was one of them, the former Coastal Carolina basketball player. Well, apparently it's injury related. He's not a Panther right now. Dax Milne, he's no longer a Panther. Andrew Rame, he's gone. And 3 other guys as well, no longer Panthers. But the one that was most noted of the people that were cut today was obviously Jadeveon Clowney, the former number 1 overall pick. He's from South Point High School there in Rock Hill, played at South Carolina, came to Carolina after a resurrection year, 9.5 sacks in Baltimore in 2023. And the hope was that he could help replace Brian Burns after the Panthers could not agree to terms and sent Brian Burns to the Rams, the Giants last year in that trade. Probably should have sent him to the Rams a couple years ago, but they did not do that. So looking at this is not really that's surprising if you've been paying attention since night 2 of the draft, when the Panthers selected in the 2nd and 3rd round 2 young edge rushers, and Nick Scorton from Texas A&M and Princely Umanmielen from Ole Miss. Right then and there, that called into question what will be the future for Jadeveon Clowney in Carolina. I would have thought even prior to that press conference that he would have this season and then that would be it. But apparently, as Dan Morgan, the Panthers president of football operations, general manager, was asked about it on that Friday evening, he had this to say: we're still working through the roster. We're still talking through things. Obviously, we're focused on the draft right now and what's in front of us, and then pressed again on how this would impact Jadeveon Clowney and his future of the team. He said, we're just kind of working through things. We're working through the draft. We're focused on that. We're going to reassess it after the draft and go from there. Well, Thursday came here on May 8th, and they reassessed a lot of guys' status on the draft after the draft. And one of those guys is Jadeveon Clowney, who is no longer a Carolina Panther. So you look at this, he did tell us last year that every contract he signs, it's a 1-year deal. He said the team can come back after a year and say, we're good here. Or the player could come back after and say, I want to rip this contract up and get a new one. So he went into it last season when very transparent, saying, this is a 1-year deal to me. And that's what it turned out to be after he signed a 2-year, $20 million contract that could be worth up to $24 million, which was a lot of money for a player who had never signed as like a priority free agent in his entire career until last season. And even as a priority he may have been, the Panthers had already signed an edge rusher prior to him in DJ Wonnum in their efforts to replace Brian Burns. They also had signed Caleb on Chason, but that was not going to preclude them from bringing in Jadeveon Clowney after he went through the process of visits and trying to figure out where he wanted to go and who could give him the kind of money that he thought made sense for him coming off of a 9.5 sack season. In Carolina, his hometown team was the team willing to do that. They gave him $12 million guaranteed, the signing bonus, his 2024 compensation, and then $2 million of this upcoming season were actually guaranteed as well. So he'll get that money, but there were incentives placed upon sack numbers. Had he had 8 sacks last year, that'd have been $500,000, 10 sacks, $500K, and then 12 sacks would get him $1 million. So potentially it could have gone up to $24 million had he reached those sack totals, which I think was Carolina's hope when they brought him in, that he could carry over what he did in that 2020 season in Baltimore, where, I mean, everybody on that Ravens team was having a career year as they went on to be the number 1 seed and eventually lost in the AFC title game at home to the Chiefs. That was a great Ravens defense, and he was a part of it. It was a big piece of that Ravens defense as well, as he played 700 snaps that season, played more snaps in 2023 with the Ravens as a rotational guy than he played last year in Carolina. Granted, he did miss 3 games, but for Clowney, considering the injuries that he had, that is pretty much a full season, and I think a good amount that they got from him last year in Carolina. So you look at the deal, that was a lot. And I wasn't really surprised that they gave him that kind of money, considering where the Panthers were at that point in time. With Burns no longer around, they were able to open up cap space to sign guys like Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis and to make the trade for Deontay Johnson. They did need to go get a veteran edge rusher, and Clowney was a big name. He was coming off of a good season. He has ties to the region, of course, being from Rock Hill, having played at South Carolina. So it made sense for the Panthers, but it always felt like a bit of an overpay. And you could say, well, this team's coming off a 2-15 season. Obviously, they have to overpay for guys like Jadeveon Clowney, but it's not like Jadeveon Clowney's ever been what people thought he was going to be. But still, Carolina needed to get an edge rusher, and they gave him that money, and they paired him with DJ Wonnum, Caleb on Chason for the time being, as eventually he was cut from the roster. And the Panthers' pass rush was, well, not great last year. Looking at him individually, PFF gave him a 70.8 grade. That was 34th out of 119 qualifying edge rushers, which is solid. Run defense grade was 63.4. That was 52nd out of 116. That was an area where he would be better than Brian Burns was when he was in Carolina, and even this past season in New York with the Giants. And if you looked at their 23 seasons comparatively, Burns ended up getting a $30 million per year deal compared to Clowney getting a $12 million deal per year. I can't even talk. A $12 million per year deal. Clowney had a better season in 23 than what Burns had, but Burns also was, according to The Athletic, the number 1 available free agent and also an ascending player, where Jadeveon Clowney was going to be 31 and playing in, I think, his 10th or 11th NFL season, and clearly was not an ascending talent, but somebody that Carolina needed to bring in. Pass rush grade, 73.2. That was 29th out of 109 edge rushers that qualified a year ago. And the PFF stats are kind of weird compared to some of the other spots. PFF, I feel like they overinflate what people do. They credited him with 44 pressures and 6 sacks last season, which I guess kind of feels right. But they gave him in 23 71 pressures and 10 sacks. So his numbers were significantly better in Baltimore, where he was getting paid $2.5 million, compared to in Carolina, where they paid him $12 million last season to come in here and to be their top edge rusher. Now, if you look at Pro Football Reference, they credit him with 5.5 sacks versus 9.5 sacks in Baltimore, and then 22 pressures last year versus 23 pressures in Baltimore. So looking at that, like, you're not always going to get home. And I've always talked about pressures greater than sacks. Pressures can lead to turnovers, which can lead to quick points. Now, sacks, that typically leads to a punt. And yes, there can be a turnover if a strip sack occurs, but I looked at pressures more favorably than sack numbers, and because it can be pretty up and down. It can be a fickle number at points and times. And you look at Pro Football Reference, and he kind of was the same player, but PFF illustrates a guy who was far more game-changing, I suppose, in 23 than he was last year. And I've already come out and said this offseason, based on like what they were asking him to do to be their top edge rusher and what they had on the roster, like, he pretty much lived up to the deal. He played 14 games. Yeah, it was a lot of money, but he played 14 games. He came in, had decent numbers, was good as far as PFF goes. So you can't really look back and be like, okay, well, that was a completely terrible deal. Like, he played, wasn't a complete bust. It's not like it was a season with Tennessee where he had a goose egg, like his first time around in Cleveland, where he didn't really do anything. He came in, he contributed. It was, yes, the worst defense in franchise history, the worst scoring defense in the history of the National Football League. But overall, I thought that Jadeveon Clowney was a positive for the Panthers last season. It's just when you looked at it moving forward, did it make sense? With Nick Scorton, with Prince Mualem being drafted, DJ Wonnum coming back and hopefully being fully healthy this season and showing you some juice there at the end of last season, signing Pat Jones II, did it make sense for the Panthers to bring back Jadeveon Clowney, or did it make more sense for them to go young? And clearly, Dan Morgan, Brant Tillis, Dave Canales, I suppose Ejiro Evero, all felt like the best thing for them moving forward into 2025 was to let Jadeveon Clowney go and to move on to some younger guys. So what next? And what are the cap implications to making this move? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena. And with Game Time, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute ticket deals can save you up to 60%. Game Time's all-in pricing means no surprise fees at checkout, and what you see is what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, back here on this emergency episode here of Locked On Panthers. 156 of you live with me here on Thursday afternoon, May 8th. Jadeveon Clowney, no longer a Carolina Panther, part of a couple of post-draft cuts on Thursday. Jordan Matthews also no longer here. Colin Granger, the basketball player who was hoping to be a football player, he's no longer around. Dax Milne, Andrew Ram, and a couple of others whose names are obviously important to their families. They led a lifelong dream to make it to the NFL, but yeah, they weren't going to factor in. So whatever. So most of those guys are no longer here in Carolina. Now looking at the Clowney of it all and what this means for the edge rusher group and just what next as far as the salary cap implications. He was set to play on a $13.775 million cap hit. We already know Taylor Moton's playing on a $31.3 million cap hit, which Carolina was still able to do everything they wanted to do defensively so far this offseason by having him stay on that cap hit. And looking at over the cap, like today before this move, they still had like $16 million of cap space. Not a ton. They still got to sign their draft class, and anyone have some room in season. There's still some other spots I thought they could have addressed prior to this move that they may not have had enough space to do. So this will allow them an opportunity to do so, as that cap hit was fifth highest on the team. The Panthers now save $7.775 million against salary cap this year, and then $6 million of that goes to dead money. So the Panthers now have just over $24 million cap space according to overthecap.com, and then $16.6 million in dead money according to overthecap.com. So those cap savings, the $7.775 million, that is enough for them to go ahead and to pay their rookies. Now the rookie salary pool is like $12 million, but looking at the cap space that will be used from that, that's $6 million. So they have $1.7 million left over after they sign everyone in their draft class. So that helps them out to do that. Whereas before, with $16 million that they had about, then that would have left them maybe about $10 million then to try to make other signings and other moves the rest of the season, which I don't know if they believed was enough for them to do so. So if you asking why do this, well, they save some salary cap money. It allows them to sign their draft picks and then open up to the opportunity to potentially go out there and to sign a free agent, free safety. Now, on the mailbag tomorrow, which again, I've already recorded. So any questions you have will be used for next week, or hopefully I'm answering all the questions that you have about Clowney. And then later on here on the show about Jonathan Brooks on Today right now with y'all on YouTube live. And then later on when you listen to it. But we talk about on the mailbag tomorrow, the free safety spot and how Lathan Ransom and Trevon Merrick, how they fit together and whether one of them could play free safety. But I still think that very clearly the Panthers need to go out and sign a veteran at that spot, whether he's playing free or playing in the box. I would think Merrick is likely going to be a box safety for them after that's what he's transitioned into over the course of his 4 years spent with the Raiders. So we've talked about Marcus Williams. We've talked about Julian Blackmon. Maybe this is a move that leads to them being signed in Carolina. And did the Panthers have enough money to sign them? I'm going to go ahead and look and see if there's been any news since then. So no news. There's a new pope apparently, so that's cool. Not to downplay that, but I mean, I'm not Catholic, so I don't really care. But congratulations to the new pope. The new pope, by the way, it is Cardinal Robert F. Prevost. He takes the name Leo the 14th. All right. Had to do some quick math. I think I got it right. Okay, so yeah, free agent safety, that could be something now that comes from this move. And would you rather have a starter there at free safety who's a vet that you trust in, or Jadeveon Clowney potentially making $12 million again this upcoming season? I personally would rather take a free agent safety like a Julian Blackmon than a player who, quite honestly, is not a difference maker at this point in time. And I was never that excited about this move. And y'all would know this because I went on live last year and talked about it. Okay, they needed to make it. I understood it. Seemed like a lot of money. Just talked about momentarily, just more briefly before that, for what they were asking him to do, what they needed. All right. It was money well spent, I suppose, for one season. But did you want to spend that kind of money again for a descending player who's not a true difference maker when you have a lot of young talent on the roster right now? So, like, while I didn't view Jadeveon Clowney as a difference maker, he was clearly the Panthers' most well-known commodity at the position and still someone that offensive coordinators were going to scheme against. You can say, well, if they're going to scheme against him, then clearly he's somebody who's a difference maker. No, he's not. Never has been. Never will be at this point in time in his career. Just did not live up to that hype. Myles Garrett, that's the guy. Jadeveon Clowney, no, respectfully, he was never that. But he was a solid player every once in a while, and I thought he was solid for Carolina last year, even if the numbers weren't as sexy as the year prior. But when you look at the edge rusher group now, it feels like to me that they wanted to go younger, as DJ Wonnum's 27, Pat Jones, the second's 26, Nick Scorton right now is 20, Princely Umanmielon's 23, DJ Johnson is 26, and he's old as hell for where he's at in his career, and Amari Barno's also 26. So all those guys are at least 5 years younger than Clowney, who's 32, just like me. And I always feel gross when I say this guy's too old. Like with Thielen, like they're not like old in terms of like actual life, but football old. Yeah, been around for a while, and maybe it makes sense to now get younger, especially when they brought in Wonnum. They saw what he could do when he came back after the blood clots, and you could think that had he been healthy for a full season, it's possible that he reaches that 8 sack total. Maybe it's a 9, even 10. Like he was able to do the 8 sacks 2 times there in Minnesota. Pat Jones second had a nice year last year. I don't know how great I feel about that. But okay, we'll see what he is able to do. He's a vet at the very least. Nick Scorton, excited about that move. And I would think at this point in time, if you already have DJ Wonnum, who I'm guessing is a starter and probably should be, and you have Nick Scorton you just took in the second round, and you're not paying Pat Jones second that much money anyways, I would guess that Scorton is in a great position to come in here and be a starter. And we have talked about this. We talked with Andrew Stefaniak, the host of Locked On Aggies, earlier in the week, and we have looked at him, Nick Scorton also, just looking at some of the scouting reports on him. And there's one scouting report that said he's a 3-down guy. So that's what you need. Wonnum, I don't know if you can say he's a 3-down guy as far as when you want to stop the run there at that edge rusher position. Nick Scorton, he can be that. So I think immediately he probably becomes your most versatile edge rusher, and he's not even played a game in the NFL. Princely Umanmielon, I still look at him as somebody who's going to have to come in and be a 3rd-down guy and develop more of those traits moving forward. DJ Johnson, oh boy, I guess there could be a great argument of like, why the hell is he still around and Clowney's not? Well, he's not making $12 million. No, Jadeveon was only guaranteed $2 million, but he would have made a sizable contract and much more money than DJ Johnson will make this upcoming season had he stayed on the roster. So I can absolutely understand when you just look on paper, that guy's gone, but this guy's here. It's much like Ian Thomas was someone that Panther fans like to kick all the time. It's like, why? Of all people, or why are you still here? What are you doing? DJ Johnson hasn't done anything. Hated the pick from day one. I think a lot of y'all also weren't a huge fan. But this gives him a chance to make the roster where Clowney was still around. I was really wondering, would he stick around? Amari Barno, he has yet to make an impact. He had the torn ACL at the end of the 2023 season that cost him the majority of last season. So we'll see, fully healthy, if he's able to do something in the final year of his rookie deal. But right now I'm looking at like Wonnum, Jones, Gordon, Monmielen as like the four guys that you're mainly relying upon. And it's not a sexy edge rusher group. It's asking a lot of two young guys in Scorton and Monmielen to come in and to have an immediate impact. But this is still a team where I get it's the NFC South. Anything's possible, but still a defense that they had a lot of vets and a lot of spots. And there are vets even in this room. You look at Johnson's a vet at this point in time, Barnes a vet at this point in time, but one of them and Jones are really the two ones you're looking at. They got vets all across the defense. And this is just a spot where there's going to be some younger guys who are going to be called upon to do more than you would say in the secondary or even at linebacker, even with Trevin Wallace having to start. So a lot of pressure now on Scorton and on Monmielen, and still not the best edge rusher group in the NFL. But I do think far more upside now than they had last year. Last year, you looked at, okay, there's upside with Wonnum when he comes back. Clowney kind of was what he was at that point in time. Everyone else didn't really get you excited. Now there's two young guys to be excited about. There's Wonnum with the upside. Pat Jones, we'll see. Johnson, we've seen. It ain't happening. Amari Barno, maybe there's a possibility there. So there's more upside now than there was a year ago, but less of a sure commodity in that room than they had when they had Jadeveon Clowney. But all in all, no reason to pay him that kind of money, especially when you invest in two young guys. Get them out there, get them ready to go, and plan for the future when Jadeveon Clowney, when he was signed last year and even prior to being cut today, was never going to be a part of the long-term future and a long-term success for this organization, at least on the field. Jonathan Brooks, there's hope that he can still be a part of the long-term future and success here in Carolina, but he's not going to be a part of it here in 2025. We'll talk about what that means for him and his future here in Charlotte in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upworks, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upworks makes hiring simple and affordable. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivered incredible results. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day, with multiple qualified candidates to choose from, instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps find affordable top-tier freelancers to scale your business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. Back here on Locked On Panthers, shout out to the 222 of you who are live and now down to 210. Sorry, goodbye to the 12 people who just left, but shout out to everybody who's joined live here on YouTube. Always try to go live anytime there's any sort of big breaking news. And I wasn't going to go fully live with just the Clowney news. Was going to record something and put it out there on YouTube and then in your podcast feeds. And then this news came out. Adam Schefter first, but then Ian Rappaport putting out that the Panthers have also placed running back Jonathan Brooks on the physically unable to perform list, or the PUP list, because of the ACL tear from week 14 in Philadelphia. That means he is out for the entirety of the 2025 season, giving him the entire season to get back to full strength. So once that news came out, it's like, oh, okay, this is a busy afternoon, and I need to hop on here and talk to my people. So shout out again to all of y'all who are watching live and all of y'all tuning in afterwards, as we got to break down this news. Clowney no longer in Carolina. We talk about what that means financially for the Panthers and what that means for the edge rusher group moving forward. What about for Jonathan Brooks? 4 things I'm looking at with this. Number one, kind of like the Clowney news, especially after the quotes from Dan Morgan and being non-committal about his future following night 2 of the draft. This isn't all that surprising news considering the timing of the injury and the severity of the injury, because that happened back in, was it November or December? But basically it took him like a full year to come back off of the first ACL tear. And I do think out of caution and knowing that they had Chuba Hubbard, who was entering into the final year of his rookie deal. They could just use him and abuse him and lose him if they chose to. They chose to keep him around, which, okay, it's not necessarily what I believe in as far as philosophy, but I think Chuba's a good player. Good locker room guy. Makes sense. What the hell? Why not? Don't do it again. But Chuba Hubbard, he's around, and you have Miles Sanders entering into his last year in Carolina. So you had two guys that you could just run into the ground and then wait until 26 to bring in Brooks. Now, once there was the injury, and even before then, they were planning on bringing Jonathon Brooks back, at least having him practice, but they had him with his window open, and they looked like they were clearly going to elevate him at some point in time to the active roster. But once Miles Sanders went down, they were really pressed into bringing him in, and he did show some signs, especially I think there was that catch and run against the Bucks where it's okay, there's the burst. That's what we saw from at Texas. That's why even with the ACL tear, the Panthers were willing to go out there on a limb and trade back up in the second round at 46 overall and take the first running back off the board in what was not necessarily a deep running back class, especially considering the one that just passed here in 2025. So looking at when the injury occurred, how long it took him, it's not that surprising. Like I had a listener who I guess just went up to Google, searched how long does it take to recover from a second ACL tear, the same knee suffered in 13 months time. And he came out with like, it's an over a year recovery. So once he told me that, he's not a doctor. I'm not a doctor. You're not a doctor. Quoting David Tepper, of course. I figured, okay, he's not going to play. And when they brought in Dowdle, and then they also drafted Trevor Etienne, there wasn't going to be a need for him to play at all this season, even if they didn't put him on PUP. And maybe it wasn't necessary, but give the guy a full year to recover and allow some of those other guys to take some of the hits, and then we'll see what happens in 2026. Now, does this impact them this season? Not really. They already have Chuba, as I mentioned, already have Rico Dowdle, and then they have Trevor Etienne, and they still have Raheem Blackshear. I'm very curious to see how Etienne is able to perform and how big of an opportunity he gets, but it was going to be the Chuba and Rico Dowdle show, and getting Dowdle coming off a 1,000-yard rushing season, in my opinion, is a better situation for Carolina than getting a healthy Jonathon Brooks back this season, who would have barely played last year, because you now have a proven NFL running back who has gone over 1,000 yards right next to another proven NFL running back who's gone over 1,000 yards in Chuba Hubbard. So Hubbard and Dowdle, those two together next season, I think better proposition than had it been Brooks and Hubbard, just based off of what we know compared to what we would hope to have seen. Third thing, what does this mean for Brooks' future in Carolina? I think it's still too early to tell. With Chuba Hubbard beginning the first year of a 4-year deal this fall, and where the big savings in that contract don't really come until after 2027, and knowing how they clearly value running backs, unless just like he completely falls off. And understand this too, like his first year, 21, I know McCaffrey missed some time, but Chuba, he got to come in. He was never really the full-time back there. And then after McCaffrey was traded away, it was Deontay Foreman, and Chuba was RB2. And it took halfway through the 2023 season for him to become the number one running back. So there's not like a ton of tread on those tires NFL-wise. I know in college he ran a lot, had the injury that one season, but he hasn't been the top back for that long at this level. So I still think there's a lot left there in his legs moving forward, to where you should be able to get a good amount of him in 25, where you have Rico Dowdle to lean on as well. Then in 2026, say things aren't great with Brooks and maybe Etienne's not living up to it, you can have him as a workhorse. And in 27 can do the same. So the next 3 years, probably the Chuba Hubbard show anyways, even had Brooks been healthy or not. Like, he probably was going to be your top back. We will never know. At least how things would have played out had Brooks always been healthy after coming back from that ACL tear. Trevor Etienne will have somewhat of a chance to position himself ahead of Jonathon Brooks as RB2 in 2026, as I'm assuming there will be a competition there. We'll have to see what Etienne's able to do and how much of an opportunity he even gets on this roster this season. That would be one thing to look at, as far as this is his chance to get a leg up and to be able to be ahead of Jonathon, especially if he's able to stay healthy. And then the last thing, does this mean the Panthers officially made a mistake with drafting Brooks? Maybe, but that's a conclusion you could have come to during the Eagles game when he tore his ACL. You could have already said this months ago, that, oh, they made a mistake. And I'm sure plenty of you have already said that they made a mistake. In extending Chuba and then drafting Etienne, maybe someone suggests that, even though They extended Chuba Hubbard prior to the second ACL tear. And then with Etienne, who knows? Maybe they looked at their board. It's not like they traded up to get him. Maybe they looked at their board and said, oh, he's the top player on our board. We're going to go with him, even if we have Chuba under contract for 4 years. And we have Jonathon, who we still believe in, coming back. And they probably knew at that point in time they were going to do this and bring him back in 26. And then they already had Rico Dowdle. So they could have just been following their board more so than having insurance for Jonathan Brooks. The insurance is Chuba Hubbard right now on a 4-year deal. That's the way I look at it. So unfortunate for Jonathan Brooks. I think he's a talented player. Truly, it sucks to have worked your ass off at Texas, sat behind Bijan Robinson, Roschon Johnson, finally get your opportunity, be a big part of a team that goes on to win the Big 12 and to go to the playoff. You get hurt at the end of the season, and now you come to the NFL, immediately get hurt, and now you're out again. So you haven't even played your first 2 years in the league. So I hope for him and his sake that he gets an opportunity. It's just, it's a business, man. And the Panthers are in a business of trying to win games. And if you're not available, can't really do it. The best ability is availability. He has plenty of ability. He just has not had the ability to stay available for Carolina, which is unfortunate. And my heart goes out to him. And I wish him a speedy recovery and the best, and hope that he comes back strong in 2026 and is able to help this team in the future. So that's the news of the day. Jadeveon Clowney, no longer Carolina Panther. It is what it is. And then Jonathan Brooks done for 2025. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast for our Locked On Podcast Network. Hosted by yours, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, where I already answered your questions this week. But next week, I'm back answering your questions for the weekly Friday mailbag here on Locked On Panthers. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And again, tune in tomorrow as we'll be talking about Ike Ekwonu. Is it time for a long-term deal? We'll be talking about Lathan Ransom and also Trevon Morgan and how they fit together at safety, and also talking about Ted McMillan and what are realistic and fair expectations for him as a top 10 draft pick at that wide receiver position as a rookie here this season. All that coming up on Friday on Locked On Panthers.